Imagine if Cam Ward wasn't a Miami Hurricane. Thankfully, he is, but how many extra wins is he going to be worth in 2024?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We made it. I'm Alex Donno. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and writer at allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much for the everydayers making us your first listen and your first watch each and every day. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available free on YouTube, and we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today. You'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Our guest today is also a University of Miami alumnus. I know that because I went to school with him. He's been kicking butt for many years at ESPN West Palm. He does awesome social media content breaking down players, including Cam Ward. He is Jeremy Marks-Peltz. We call him JMP. How you doing, sir?
Longtime fan of the Locked On Canes podcast. And excited to reconnect with you and talk some Canes football.
Dude, JMP, it means a lot that you're here. And honestly, ever since Cam Ward decided to commit to Miami, we thought he was going to go to the NFL draft. He pulled the 180. He's a Miami Hurricane now. You've put out really some of the best content and breakdowns in your time studying the film and looking at what Cam Ward does best. So before we talk about how many wins he could be worth to Miami this year, let's talk about some of the nuts and bolts. What are the big things that stand out to you about the former Washington State, now Miami Hurricanes quarterback?
Yeah, appreciate the kind words. Let me just back up for 1 second. So when Tyler Van Dyke got benched for the Florida State game, to me, that was going to be curtains for his Miami Hurricanes career after this season. So I started looking, around mid to late November at not just who was going to replace TVD, and with all due respect to Ja'Cory Brown and Emory Williams, I did not think that QB1 for 2024 was on that roster, but somebody that was a difference maker, an elevator, which Miami hasn't had that quarterback in decades. And I didn't know a lot about Cam Ward. I probably did not watch more than a few minutes of a Washington State game before kind of diving into the film. But in looking at him and a bunch of other guys, from Will Howard to Will Rogers to Tunga Bailoa's brother, Cam Ward was the guy that I fell in love with. I think, look, he has flaws, but I don't think he has weaknesses. And what I mean by that is his arm talent is insanely good. He can make every throw. Accuracy, maybe it's not, it could be better, but where he places the ball, he puts receivers constantly in the best position to run after the catch. I am really impressed, and I think this goes underrated, his pre-snap recognition. And I know that he's been in one offense, which may or may not be the same offense that Shannon Dawson and Mario Cristobal run at Miami, but he's been in that air raid offense at Washington State. I think it's also the air raid offense he was in at Incarnate Ward. But there were multiple plays. The game against Washington, which, obviously went to the national championship game, that was one of the ones that I studied. And there were multiple touchdowns where pre-snap, he's recognizing where the safety is going to be, where he has an advantageous matchup. There was one, I think it was the second touchdown, where, there wasn't a defender that was lined up near, where he wanted the receiver to be. So he motions the receiver from one end of the formation to the slot. And the defensive back is, has his heels on the goal line. He knows I can just throw the ball underneath, pitch and catch, touchdown. And it's those kind of things, there isn't anything that Cam Ward can't do. And that, to me, is what made him so exciting. And that, to me, even though it got scary at times, Alex, when, when Miami might have to go to, choices 4, 5, 6. But that, to me, the answer was always go all in for Cam Ward, because he was the guy that if Miami wants to get to, the type of win total that I think they can get to, it's going to be because of Cam Ward. And if they didn't get Cam Ward, they weren't going to get to that win total.
And the win total, the projection from the sportsbooks came out earlier this week, and it came out higher than I thought it would, JMP. 9.5 is the projected win total, which means 10 wins or more, you go over. 9 wins or fewer, you go under, and that's compared to it's been 7.5 the last couple of years, and Miami fell short of 7.5 each of the past 2 seasons. So I've got to figure the acquisition of Cam Ward is a huge factor in that win total being so high. And you talked about how scary it was at times because Ward had declared for the NFL draft. Miami seemed to maybe be interested in Tua's brother, and he ultimately wasn't granted the waiver. So it was basically either get Cam Ward or you would have less proven guys like Reese Poffenbarger, Ja'Carri Brown, and Emory Williams competing for the starting job next year. If it was that situation, JMP, what do you think the win total would be? Would it be 7.5 again? Like, how many extra wins do you think Cam Ward is worth for this team?
Well, so my goal is 10, and they haven't gotten there since 2017, I believe was the last time. And I think 10 will get you either in the back end of the college football playoff discussion or on the precipice of it. I think, look, they won 7. I do think that they improved. I think they took a big step forward in 2023 versus 2022. And some of the numbers, underscore that, but I don't think the record necessarily underscores that. But yeah, with, let's just say, the winner of the Ja'Carri Brown, Emory Williams, Reese Poffenbarger Derby, unless one of those guys, really took a major step forward, I think you would probably have been looking at 8. So I think Cam Ward gets you at least 2, assuming that we're getting the Cam Ward that we got at Washington State. And if Cam Ward performs like a first-round quarterback, which he said the reason he didn't go to the NFL, the reason that he joined Miami is he thought he was a day 1 pick and not a day 2 pick. We could be looking at 11. We could be looking at potentially a college football playoff team. So I would think 2 to 3 wins. And by the way, I say that as somebody, and this, Alex, I'm a bigger Tyler Van Dyke fan than most.
Yeah.
But I think, even taking that into account, and I know TVD was in part responsible for at least 2 of their losses last year. I think 2 to 3 wins is where I'd probably put the baseline.
Yeah, and so knowing that you're a bigger Van Dyke fan than most, probably a bigger Van Dyke fan than me, although I support him more than most people do, I would like to see him do well at Wisconsin. Like, I'm not going to be one of those sour grape X's where like, oh, I want this guy to get benched. No, listen, I want what's best for him. I want him to play well. And that would be a lot easier for our fan base to tolerate if Miami also does well. Like, if Cam Ward does exceptionally well and Tyler Van Dyke has a good season in Wisconsin, everyone should be happy and not bitter about TVD.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And especially with, look, a lot of it was Tyler's doing. But I think with the fact it was really hard, and I would not have benched him for the Florida State game. I thought, look, I understand that he was going through maybe the roughest stretch that he had in his Miami career. I think when you have a quarterback that, frankly, could have gone to Alabama, could have gone other places, ended up staying at Miami, to bench him for their biggest game of the season, for their biggest, for the rivalry. One of the reasons you come to Miami is to play in that Miami FSU game. To do that, I think was pretty tough. So I do feel for TVD. I think he is going into a pretty good situation with Wisconsin where, it's it's more of an offense that he's similar for. Wisconsin in the past had been a very Big Ten, run the ball first type offense. Now they've got Phil Longo, the former offensive coordinator at North Carolina. So it's more of an air raid, type system. But yeah, I hope TVD does well, but yeah, it is a win-win situation. And also if Cam Ward struggles and Tyler Van Dyke did well, we got to admit, like, we kind of helped run him out of town. So we can't be that upset. But my guess is Van Dyke will kind of resurrect his career. And that being said, he will not be Cam Ward.
We're only getting started on this episode of Locked On Canes. I want to talk about Miami's offensive line because there is a really important spot to fill, and that's left guard. I'd love JMP's take on who might be able to step up and fill that role because Miami does have capable candidates on that roster to fill in for Javion Cohen. I want to talk about the wide receiver room. I think we know who the top two starters are going to be. Who's going to be the guy to replace Colby Young? Is it someone currently on the roster? Could it be somebody Miami finds in the transfer portal? And I want everyone watching this and listening to this to be thinking about this for the next few minutes because we all know the EA Sports College Football 25 game is going to be coming out this summer. We're going to be debating player ratings for the next few months. Who do you think is going to be the highest rated Miami Hurricanes player on the new video game? So you know what you want to do? You want to keep it locked right here to this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. And I already know you're keeping it locked to FanDuel. Guys, we're winning money. I know football season's behind us. Basketball, hockey, soccer. There's so much going on. You can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. I know you haven't been doing that great on your Miami Hurricanes hoops bets lately. Hopefully you're doing better on your Miami Heat bets. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. I love the player props, guys. You know I love betting on my guys like Jaime Jaquez Jr., Bam Adebayo, and company on the Miami Heat. I have such a great time on the FanDuel app. I want you to as well. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today on a Friday. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. By the way, if you're on YouTube right now, make sure after you watch Locked On Canes, you watch Locked On Sports Today. This network, the Locked On Network, has launched the first ever 24/7 streaming sports YouTube channel with the national experts who cover every league, local experts like myself who cover every team. That channel never sleeps. It is streaming 24/7 Locked On Sports Today. Jeremy Marks-Peltz, a.k.a. JMP, is with me here on this new episode of Locked On Canes. So, JMP, we've been talking a lot on Locked On Canes about who's going to step up in the wide receiver room, right? I'm expecting Restrepo to be good as ever, maybe even better with Cam Ward throwing him the football. As long as Jacoby George can stay focused, I think he can have a big year this year. So then the question is, who's going to be the next man up? Hopefully there's a big rotation of productive players, but who do you think that third starter is going to be?
Yeah, so I think they could go a couple different ways. And I mean, Colby Young gave you 47 catches, 563 yards, 3 touchdowns. So that's what you're going to need to replace. And Isaiah Horton seems like the leader in the clubhouse. Maybe he's that guy. I haven't seen enough of him to say that he, for sure, put him in permanent ink. He's the number 3 receiver. I think it depends, Alex, on are they running the wide open air raid offense, or are they running, more of the offense that we saw, which, has some air raid principles? Because the Cam Ward air raid offense was a lot of fast and quick receivers. And this is why I think Xavier Restrepo might even be better this year than he was last year. But it's a lot of shorter, quicker receivers. Get into open space. Cam Ward will find you the football. And so, maybe that's a Ray Joseph. Maybe that's one of the younger guys, depending on if, Trader, from his playbook standpoint, from his frame standpoint, or Nye Carr, they could be perfect fits. If it is more of a, we're going to come out with 3 receivers and a tight end, and, we're going to run 50% of the time, and we want that big-bodied X receiver. Well, on the roster, Isaiah Horton is that guy. I also think that's where potentially the transfer portal after the spring could be an option. So I don't have a firm answer because I want to see what the offense looks like. And I think the potential 3rd and 4th receivers and the Colby Young replacement depends on what kind of receiver they're looking at.
That's well said. And I think that, and this is not just for this coming season, but over the next couple of years, I think we're going to see a bit of a renaissance in the receiver room from Miami because they've got a lot of a lot of irons in the fire when it comes to top recruits they're looking to bring in. Kevin Beard is someone that I really trust, not only as a developer and a recruiter. I like this move that Miami made. Apparently, he's going to be a consultant here, but Sly Johnson is coming aboard, who's been a quarterback's coach in the area for like 20 plus years. He's worked with Xavier Restrepo, so he's going to apparently be doing some work with Miami receivers. So I think we're hitting a new era here, JMP, because we haven't really had enough elite guys come through in recent years. I mean, we had that incredible season, Van Dyke's first year, when Charleston Rambo just blew up, and Mike Harley had a really good year, but there's not been enough consistency since then.
Yeah, and it's funny is, we've looked for that quarterback that's going to elevate the program. For a receiver, for me, the last couple of years, it's how can you find your Charleston Rambo? Now, I think Xavier Restrepo, at least last year, and with the potential that he brings this year, he's got a little different physique. He's smaller than Rambo, but he could be that kind of receiver. And I do think, Washington State had a guy named Josh Kelly, who's at Texas Tech now, put up similar numbers to Jacoby George. I saw a lot of similarities on film, in the type of routes that Josh Kelly ran, and how they could use Jacoby George. Now, Josh Kelly, he had under 1,000 yards receiving. He was still really good, but that, they had about 3 different guys that, got the bulk of the attention from Cam Ward. So I think they're in good hands. I look at more as who is either that number 3 receiver, or who are the guys that are going to make up the Colby Young and Brashard Smith production. And if Miami throws the ball more than it did last year, you're adding in some extra numbers. But I mean, they have so many different receivers, and the way that this offense runs, this is one of the reasons, Alex, why, I'm hoping it is more of the wide open style, because they don't have that massive, other than Isaiah Horton, they don't have that big bodied receiver, but this receiver room is almost perfect for that kind of offense. And it's probably not so perfect for, the bigger kind of pro style offense that, Miami ran at times last year.
I think that's a great point, because in the scenario you describe, Miami, and you're right to bring up, Miami also lost Brashard Smith. I don't see any reason why a guy like Ray Joseph can't do just about everything Brashard Smith did here, and hopefully even more. Jojo Trader, everyone says he's having an awesome offseason workout session so far. I've seen some stuff on social media with Nye Carr, who's another true freshman, early enrollee out there doing some work. Robbie Washington is on the roster, so there's a lot of opportunity there. But I want to talk about the line of scrimmage, JMP, because it's I expect Miami's offensive line to be really good again. But they do have some shoes to fill. They brought in Zach Carpenter, who I think can be a really good replacement for Matt Lee at center. They haven't brought in like a direct replacement for Javion Cohen, though, at left guard. I've kind of long been of the thinking that Matthew McCoy is probably the next man up there, but I'm also, based on what I'm hearing about offseason workouts, I'm not sleeping on Tommy Kinsler either, who was a true freshman last year, that maybe one of these guys can step up and become the Cohen replacement. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was going to be Matthew McCoy, because he was that 6th offensive lineman, especially when Sampson went down last year. So it seemed like he was the natural replacement. But yeah, we heard a lot about Tommy Kinsler. We've heard about Markel Bell, if he's, ready to take that jump from JUCO to FBS Power 5 play. And the interesting thing about those two guys, so Javion Cohen, who's going to be very hard to replace, but Javion Cohen was a 305-pounder. Kinsler's 340. Bell, I think, is 340.
Wow.
So, does that mean that maybe there? And I also think, and I like Carpenter. I think he's a different kind of center. I think he's less athletic than Matt Lee, but he's more physical. And I do think with Cam Ward, you can have a more diverse run game. I mean, Miami ran a lot of kind of the same run schemes, a lot of inside zone, a lot of split zone, which is where they took the tight end, from one side and had him block, the end on the opposite side. So I am intrigued by if it's Kinsler or if it's Bell, does that give them the opportunity with their size to have a more diverse offensive line and a more diverse run game? And I guess the one thing we can't discount, which was a little bit of a surprise, but they went after that. Was it the left guard at Washington? His name escapes me. So does that mean, after the spring, they could still think, especially with this all-in approach, that their left guard, their Javion Cohen replacement, is not in this program right now?
Yeah, it was Nate Kaleppo was the guy from Washington.
Right.
We went after and came up short on. Any thought, by the way, JMP, because Miami's got an important vacancy shifting over to the defense right now for defensive backs coach. According to Gabby Urrutia at Inside the U, we may have had a couple of guys interview for that already. Evan Cooper from Indiana and Chevis Jackson from Marshall apparently have already interviewed for that job. One of my colleagues at allhurricanes.com pointed out to me the other day that Miami, even the university, posted the open job at LinkedIn Jobs, who's a great sponsor here on the program. So we're happy that they did that. But
so are you going to apply now? You are Mr. LinkedIn. So.
I am Mr. LinkedIn.
Is Alex Donno a candidate?
I'm going to apply just to make sure they reject me immediately, because that if they've got the proper people vetting their LinkedIn page, they're going to see me apply. Get this clown off of my list. Oh man! But any thought on that vacancy? Because there's also fans will bring up a lot of names that I don't know if they're candidates or how realistic. Like, we're all big fans of DeMarcus Van Dyke, who's right now at USF. But it doesn't really necessarily seem like he's a candidate despite his Miami history. People want to steal Patrick Surtain from Florida State. I've got one of my listeners wants me to start a rumor that we're going to steal Sam Madison from the Miami Dolphins. So fans want certain people for this job.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've heard the same names too. I love DVD as a player. Maybe one day he's that guy. I do think, and I'm not pinning, much of the blame on him. I mean, he spent several years, in the secondary under Manny Diaz. That secondary had a lot of talent. They were a horrific tackling team. So again, I mean, I think that was a lot more of a Manny Diaz thing than a DeMarcus Van Dyke thing, and even Pat Surtain. I mean, it's, absolute legend down here, both as a Dolphin and a high school coach, but I mean, this is his second year coaching in college football. So I actually like a couple of the names that, reportedly Miami's interviewed. Chevis Jackson seems like, and I remember watching when Lance Guidry got the job, I really like that Marshall secondary. I like the scheme. We saw a lot of the same things from Miami, but their secondary was aggressive, but they could shift between man and zone, a lot of different coverages. And, if you have Chevis Jackson, I assume more of an emphasis on the corners with Lance Guidry, safety being his background. I think that could be a good fit. The Evan Cooper one's interesting because, would it be a money thing as to why he'd come down? Because he's got I think he's got the passing game coordinator title in Nebraska. He's been with Matt Rule a lot of different places.
That's right.
There's one other name. I don't know much about this guy, but so the cornerbacks coach at Alabama before Tavares Robinson was a guy named Jay Valai. He is now he's now the defensive backs coach and assistant head coach for defense at Oklahoma. This is his second year. I assume he's probably very happy here, but in terms of the under the radar guy, he also spent time at Rutgers. So if we're looking at that Mario Cristobal wants to go big game hunting guy who had some Nick Saban and Greg Schiano experience, maybe that's somebody. One thing though, Alex, to me on the coaching front, the most important thing, or the most important two things. One, it's somebody that even if it's a Mario Cristobal decision, it is somebody that Lance Guidry wants and signs off on. And two, it's somebody that carries out the vision of the Lance Guidry defense. Right. Because we saw when you put together an all-star name, all-star coaching staff, a lot of big names that fans want, and there's no consistency there. It's not picked by, the offensive defensive coordinator. See 2022 Miami Hurricanes coaching staff, which, that was, did not work out in spectacularly a hot mess. So that to me is the most important thing is, who does Lance Guidry want, even if he's not the final person signing off on this, to be, his defensive backs coach?
We're not done yet on this episode of Locked On Canes because we are in a couple of months, or I guess July. How many months away is July? I don't know, 4 or 5 months. I'm going to be taking like 2 weeks off from life just to play the new NCAA video game. As much as I suck at video games, I'm going to take 2 weeks off, play the game. I'm going to be playing with my Hurricanes the entire time. Who's going to be the highest rated Miami Hurricane on the NCAA video game, College Football 25? We will talk about that and more when we come back. Keep it locked here on Locked On Canes. And I know you're keeping it locked to Game Time. You need tickets to a sporting event, concert, especially last-minute tickets. Guys, you're getting the best deals at Game Time. Upcoming Florida Panthers against Ottawa Senators game. I'm looking at tickets for that game coming up for $17, starting at $17 each. You're looking at the best possible tickets for upcoming Heat games, upcoming concerts, Inter-Miami games. Folks, you need to be checking out the deals at Game Time. Download the Game Time app. I love how they give you views from your seat. You'll know exactly what you'll be looking at from where you're sitting. And right now, guys, new users can get $20 off your first purchase with our code Locked On. The Game Time guarantee, you get this every time you buy tickets, means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So, guys, try it out. Download the Game Time app. Use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, JMP, I did put it out on our X account at Locked On Canes. Who's going to be the highest rated Miami Hurricanes player on the new EA College Football 25 video game? Most people are saying Cam Ward. We got a couple shout outs for Ruben Bain, who I think should be like a 90, 91 overall. But I don't know, JMP. I feel like Kiko Maui Noah. I think there's really no weaknesses to his game. Senior linebacker next year. I think he might be the guy who's the highest rated on the game.
The two guys that I thought of at first were Ruben Bain and actually, and I don't know as much as you do about the video games, but if offensive linemen are rated really high, Jalen Rivers.
Okay, yeah.
Who I feel like could end up being a first-round pick, with kind of all of his production and improvement. But then there was an article, I think it was on 247 Sports, where they were projecting the top 10 rated players in the country. Number 10 was Dylan Gabriel,
Really?
Who's
is it what is he at Oregon now or Washington?
Yeah.
Oregon, yeah.
Formerly Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I watched Dylan Gabriel tape. I like Cam Ward better than Dylan Gabriel. So if we're talking October, November, and we're doing these ratings, which I know we're not, I think then the answer is probably Cam Ward, because I like Cam Ward better than Dylan Gabriel. But if we're going by who's already shown it at Miami, I'd probably go either Bain or Rivers. Kiko's an interesting one. To me, he'd be probably like fourth on that list.
By the way, people have had their jokes. I've seen that it's funny every time, I'll admit, because I can laugh at the program that I love, but I keep seeing this joke about how the game's going to be so realistic, Miami will not have a kneel down in their playbook. I've seen that one a few times, and I've been advocating for this, JMP. If they want to make the experience authentic, the ACC officiating needs to be terrible.
Absolutely.
Because usually when you play like Madden or the old NCAA games, like whenever they review something and you see they always get it right. Like when they review something, it's definitely, they called that, it's not a fumble. He definitely didn't fumble. Like they always get it right. If they want to make the video game authentic, you're playing with ACC officials. You're going to see clearly it wasn't a fumble, but they call it a fumble. It was a safety, but they said it was not a safety. Like, we really want to make this thing real. They got to go all in.
Yeah, I was going to say, if it's Miami, you can sack the quarterback in the end zone and it not cost 2 points. And also, if you're going to replay, no matter what, they are going to stick with the call on the field, because God forbid the ACC officiating ever looks bad.
Yeah. And also, I hope that on the game, Florida State just always gets snubbed from the playoff. Whether it's 4-team, 12-team, 16-team, like they're always the next team out.
And then are they going to play all their fourth stringers then in whatever bowl game end up in?
I love it. Well, fantastic catching up with you. Jeremy Marks-Peltz. Make sure you follow him on X at JMP1063. Also, check out his Instagram and TikTok channels at JMP Football on IG, at JMP1063 on TikTok. Jeremy, I can't thank you so much for taking the time, my friend. Enjoy your weekend coming up.
Alex, you too. This was a blast, and continue the great work.
Thank you. You too. We'll talk to everyone next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.